I'm Rihanna, and welcome to Rihanna's Fiber Arts. If you watched my WIT Roundup video, you saw my loom warped up with these cotton kitchen towels. They're, as you can see, off the loom and finished. I ended up with 2 tea towel lengths, one with the leftover of the warp yarn and then one just with the white. And then I had enough left on the warp to do 2 small washcloth sizes, and these are just folded double. So it was that length, and then I folded the length in half and sewed them shut to make them double thickness because they are quite thin and drapey. I'm super happy with how they turned out. But after taking them off the loom, I had the usual pile of scrap thread that you get when you weave something. And I started looking for my bag of scrap thread to put it in and realized I had used all the scrap thread up in another project and then used the bag to store something else. And now I don't have a bag to put all my scrap thread in. So I thought today we could make a bag together to hold all my scrap thread. That led me to getting out my fabric stash in order to make the bag. And I realized perhaps I need a few more bags to add some organization to my fabric stash as well. So today we're not only making a bag to hold all my thread scraps, we are also going to make a couple of bags to help organize my fabric scraps into something I can access a little more easily and tell what I have instead of digging through the piles it's in right now. In terms of picking out the fabric for the scrap thread bag, I think I'm going to use this. It's an abandoned project that I started trying to make a patchwork and slow stitched cardigan. And you can see this is the back panel. I started piecing it all together. I even started doing some of the stitching, and then it just got put away for a while. And when I got it back out, I didn't like the style anymore. I had done not the best job patterning it, so it was too big and boxy. It wasn't anything I was gonna wear, and I had not gotten very far. I hadn't gotten past the back panel patchworking. Everything else was just still cut scraps. So I recently took a chunk out of it for another project and now have the rest of it already in these nice patchwork pieces with some stitching on them. So I think I'm going to use this to make the scrap thread bag, probably not the whole piece. I think I want to use the top where I already have this nice stitching. So maybe fold it in half about that way and make the pouch somehow that size. But I will play around with that and see, and use that for the scrap thread pouch. So I want to do a Japanese rice bag style where it's got the square bottom and kind of stiff sides and then opens at the top so that I can store my fabric squares folded kind of KonMari style so that I can see all the scrap fabric that I have. For this inner layer to add some stiffness, I'm going to use this cotton drop cloth material. I think it will add some good sturdiness once it's layered between the cloth. And then I think I'm going to do some stitching on top of each of the panels just to add even more reinforcement. For the decorative fabric on the rice bag one, I have a lot of options of this different quilting cotton. So I think I'm gonna pick a few quilting cotton patterns that look nice together and just patch those on the different sides. So I'm gonna pick through my fabric and get started. I've got my fabrics for the outside of my rice bag picked out. It will have 5 sides, so you can pick 5 different fabrics like I did, or you can do them all the same. But these are what I'm going to use for the outside fabric. And then for the size, I made a paper template, and this is a really easy way to do a rice bag template. It's just an 8.5 by 11 standard piece of letter paper, and I squared off the 8.5 so that it's the same on both sides. And then the little bit that is left, I just tore in half or cut in half. So you just need one of those. And now this is the base for your bag pieces, so your bottom and your sides. And then this will be the tab the string runs through. So I have 4 tabs cut, and these will get folded in half, and then the string will run through them on the side. And that's just that template cut with some seam allowance. And then I also am going to use that fabric for the inner lining. It was a white cotton sheet that I dyed using chrysanthemums. So this is red chrysanthemums, came out this pretty pear green color. And I'm going to use that for the lining. So I have 5 pieces for the lining, 1 for each side, and then 1 for the bottom cut. And you can see I left a seam allowance. I just drew it on regular pencil and left a seam allowance around. No, I did not iron them. It'll be fine. It's flat enough. And then I also went ahead and cut that lining piece out. And for the inner lining, because it's going to get sandwiched between these fabrics, I didn't leave a seam allowance. So I cut exactly on the template line for those, so that when we layer it up, it'll get sandwiched in between without having extra bulk at the seams. So to cut out our shapes, just grab whatever fabric you're using, trace out the template, and I try and line it up to the grain line so that the template is straight on the grain. But for this, it's not the most important thing. If it's a little wonky, that's okay. The bag will still work. And you can't see my line very well, but once you have your line, you can go ahead and cut out with your seam allowance. I do about 1/2 inch of seam allowance, but I'm kind of just eyeballing it because when you're sewing, you'll be able to see that line. And once you have that cut out, you just need 5 of those, and then that will be the outside piece of the fabric. So I'm going to cut out 5 more pieces from my fabric, and I'll be back in a minute. I ended up doing a bit of editing on the colors because I realized I could get all 4 pieces from this teal floral fabric for the sides. So I decided to do the sides, the 4 sides all the same, and then use this green leaf as the bottom. So the 4 sides will be this, and then the bottom will be that green with this color as the lining. So those are all my pieces cut out for the rice bag. And then for the thread scrap bag, the patch bag, I didn't end up cutting it off the top just because the sleeve shaping was interfering with how I wanted to do the pouch. So I cut it from the bottom corner. So this side is already rolled in and tacked down. Everything's basted together on the patchwork. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn in all the other sides and tack it down to the lining so it's fully encased, do some fun stitching on top just to add texture, and then I'm gonna do just a simple envelope pouch with, I think I'm gonna do a folded corner so that once it starts filling up with thread, it'll sit kind of flat as it fills up. But I am going to do all that hand stitching off camera, and then I will check back in when I've made some progress. I've completed the stitching on the loose thread pouch. I did these circles of Scotch darning, filled in all the empty spaces with seed stitch, and I did all that flat, and then folded it up and connected the sides just with a blanket stitch. I did it with 2 threads of kind of purpley maroon embroidery floss to contrast with the green a little bit while still going, and I think it turned out super nice. I just have to add a closure. Haven't decided if I'm doing buttons or ties yet, but I've got all my loose threads in there. For the rice bag, originally I cut and said 4 pieces for these tabs. You actually need 8. You need 2 per side so that you can sew them together and then turn them out. So I cut 4 more of those. And then when I laid it out, I wanted a little more body to it. So I ended up doubling up the inner layer of this cotton drop cloth. So I have 2 pieces of that per side. And I've started stitching up the first one. I just did a running stitch along the outside to hold it all together. And then I'm gonna fill it all in with running stitches. And then looking at it, I think I might go in between these gaps with a row of running stitches the other way, but I'll see how I feel after I finish the first one, and then I'll just do the others to match. I have sewn up the side seams to connect the 2 tab pieces together so that I can turn them out and have encased seams. I did this on all 4 of the tab pieces just using the sewing machine so that they are all finished. I also finished all the decorative hand stitching on the outside panels. So I did running stitches on all of the sides, just going one way. And then on the bottom, I went back and crossed some of those running stitches so that there was more texture and it was less pointing a specific direction since it'll be the bottom. So I'll have that as the bottom, and then all of the side panels, the running stitches will be pointing upwards. I then started constructing the individual panels. So what I did is I took one of these pieces and I folded it in half so that now that loop will be where the string goes through. And then I took one of the panels, made sure the running stitches were going up towards the tab, and then pinned it in the middle facing down so that the edge would just be caught. And then I pinned a lining piece over the top, and then I sewed around the side and top seams, leaving the bottom open. And when I sewed, I did just on the outside of that lining layer so that it wasn't caught in the seams. And that turned out like this. So you can see, or you can't really see, the seam is hidden just so that it didn't catch the white cotton lining layer. And I did that up the 3 sides. So now I can turn it out. And you can see the tab piece was caught so that now the tab is floating on the top to put the string through. And then on the bottom, you can just close that up. And then this is a finished one. So I finished one so far. I'm going to go do the rest, where then I just did a straight stitch on the machine to close it. So once I have all 4 panels put together, I will come back and show you how to stitch them all together. I have all my panels sewn shut, so all the raw edges are fully encased, and now I can start sewing them together. So I'm just going to lay them out so that the tabs are facing up, and then whip stitch them to the bottom panel. So I'm going to go around and just stitch this square, and then I'll pull the sides up and whip stitch each of the sides together. I'm just doing that with the same cotton thread I use to do all the decorative stitching. So I'll start with my first panel, face them together, and then whip stitch along this edge. You can also face them the other way depending on which way you want your seam facing. I'm just going to tie a knot and tuck that on the inside. And then sew up all along the edge, just using a whip stitch. And I think I will need to go get my thimble for this. So I'm going to sew up all these sides, and then I will come back to choose a string to go through the top. I'm almost done with the stitching on my rice bag, so I decided to get out my yarn stash and look for a yarn or a cord that'll work well for a closure on both of the bags. But my yarn storage looks like this. So I think we might need a few more storage bags to make this a little easier to manage. So in the meantime, I have some more fabric to make just a few quick drawstring bags. So the first fabric I'm going to make a drawstring bag with is this eco-printed cotton sheet that I did with marigold petals. So it's already got one finished edge, and I just have to do down the side, down the bottom, and then add the cord. The next bag I'm going to make using this blue quilting fabric, and I'm going to, for decoration, add on this cute print of a whale that I got sent in a craft exchange that I don't have enough of the fabric to make a bag on its own, but I think it'll look nice as an applique on this blue checked bag. The last piece of fabric I have is what's left of that shirt back from the first bag and another piece of the backing cloth from it. And I'm just going to put these together to make a longer drawstring bag, and it'll have like a funny shape on the side, but I'm going to smooth it out a little bit so you don't really notice it, and that'll use up the rest of that patchwork. So I'm going to get started on these drawstring bags so that I can tell what's going on with my yarn. I am finished with all of the bags. First up is this bag we started with the Scotch darning stitches. I did not end up using it as a scrap thread bag because by the time I was finished making all these bags, it was already full. So what I'm using it for instead is to keep all of my markers and pens and writing utensils in. Right now for the closure, I just have some hand spun silk tied onto the edges to wrap around. I don't love this closure and will probably do something different, maybe some buttons or snaps in the future. But for now, it works really well to hold all my writing utensils. The next bag, and this is my favorite out of all of them, I'm so happy with how it turned out, was the rice bag. So this is the final result with all the sides stitched up. That's the bottom. And for the cord, I used some hand spun wool and then used a button as the closure. And so it opens up and it stays upright even when there's nothing in it. So it makes it great to be able to sort through and look around. But stored inside, I just have all of my cotton fabric scraps, all the little pieces that are pretty much only good for patchwork at this point, are all stuffed in here. So when I'm doing a project that needs scrap pieces, they're all in here to sort through. Then I have the 3 drawstring bags. The first one is the blue one with the whale on the front. I think it turned out so cute, and I love having the whale stamp on there that I was sent. And inside, I just have my barrette silk that is left from the hand spun shirt project. So that's that one. And then the eco print one is super simple. I just did a square bag. On the blue one, I did fold the corners in, so it had more of a bottom. I didn't do that. I left the corners on the yellow one. And inside, I just have all of my loose scraps of small bits of yarn. So things that I just have very little of, not enough for a complete project, are all stuffed in there. The last of the 3 bags is the one that actually ended up being the scrap bag. And it's that same shirt back, that abandoned shirt back patchwork I used for the first bag. And it turned out very long, which is actually perfect for shoving scrap thread in, because when it's not as full, like right now, it can roll up and not take up a ton of space. But then if it's a while before I use them up as stuffing, it can get quite full of yarn ends. So now I have somewhere to keep all my yarn ends that started this whole adventure. Once I started making bags and kind of reorganizing my stash, I noticed I also had a bag I had made a long time ago back in high school that needed some mending. So I did that as well. This is the bag. It's just a drawstring bag like the other ones. And it's made with old denim. I painted a dandelion on the front, and the inside had started fraying because I did not roll my hem all the way in. And the string had come out. So I just sewed that edge back down, put a new string in it, and this bag has all my silk scraps for my fabric. And then while I was showing you my new bags, I thought I would show you the ones I already had to organize my stash as well. So a few of the other bags I've made in the past, these are all drawstring bags because they're super quick and easy to make. This one is done with some eco-printed fabric done with leaves. And I have 2 of that same fabric of the little half fold size bags. One has all of my felting wool in it, and the other has my cotton poonies that are prepared for spinning on my charka. Then I also have this big bag made with the same marigold eco print as the bag we did in this video. And this has all my raw cotton in it. And this one's my favorite because it has this little bit of purple, which is an eco print from an Indian blanket flower I got from my mom's wildflower patch. And I love just that little pop of purple and all of the yellow. So all of these together are now my cloth bag collection, and I'm sure I will find something I need to put in a bag and be making more in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.